Well, hello everyone, it's Kathy and Rosie Vesperina. It's a little bit dark on the camera because it's some ridiculous hour of the morning. Rosie says it's about 6:15, but it's actually only about 6. Rosie's a bit fast. And we're recording this and heading out for our ride very early because it is going to be a stinker of a hot day today. I think up around 38 degrees. So I had the bright idea that we'd head to Norah Head Clubhouse Cafe for breakfast before the heat gets us. And so the ride is with our lovely ladies from the Facebook Central Coast Women's Riders group, and meeting some at Greenpoint, some at Baddo Bay, and then we head on to the cafe. What else is exciting is you're watching this on the 31st of December 2025. Hello, Mr. Policeman. And so happy New Year to you and your family. 2025 was a bit of a crazy year for me, both professionally and personally, so I'm looking forward to hopefully a calmer 2026. We'll see how we go. A funny story. When I was little in high school, I always thought that by the time it got to the 2000s that we would be flying in cars in the air rather than on the road. Obviously that hasn't really happened, but we do have driverless cars, don't we? I think that me thinking that was probably because I loved the Jetsons. I don't know whether you've heard of the Jetsons, but it was a cartoon that was very popular when I was a kid. My brothers and sister and I loved it. Six kids altogether, 4 brothers, 1 sister and myself. But the Jetsons was one of our favourite cartoons. So we head into 2026, and it's my year of turning 60, which I find really hard to believe as well. So we took a different route to head off today, because I think I mentioned in not the previous but the one before video that I was getting a bit sick of taking the same route, so we went up over the hill, up over Rumballara, and now we are heading through Gosford and heading to the shops. This route is a little bit more windy and it's quite nice, and there are no cars on the road, or very few cars on the road, which makes riding very pleasant. I think the temperature is already up around 23 or 24 degrees, but because I'm riding, obviously there's a little bit of a cool breeze and it's quite lovely. The place that we're going for breakfast this morning is called the Norah Head Clubhouse, and it is a cafe. It opens about 7:30 in the morning, and it's a cafe that's just at the base of where you walk up to go to the Norah Head Lighthouse. The lighthouse has great views out, obviously, to the ocean, but you can also stay there, and I've stayed there a few times in the past over a weekend, and it's fabulous there. So if you're either in Australia or on the coast, you should try and rent the cottages there. This area along here is only 50 kilometres, which is fine because that's probably better for Rosie this hour of the morning. The sky is beautiful. I always comment on the sky, but I just love a big sky. We'll head down here and we will turn right, and then we'll be at East Gosford, which you know that area around East Gosford because we've ridden there before. So it's just a slightly different way of heading towards Greenpoint and Erina rather than just going up the highway. Look at that sunset coming up straight ahead. How gorgeous is that? Look at the colour. Oh, this time of morning is beautiful for hiking and also for riding. This area here is East Gosford, which you have been through before many a times. Now, other news that I wanted to tell you was that since the last video, I think I mentioned that I was going to try a private lesson on a geared bike. Well, I've done that private lesson on the geared bike, and that was a bit of a surprise. I thought that I would really struggle with it, but I have mentioned before that I have driven a manual car before, so I kind of understand the concept of gears and changing gears. And so, apart from stalling the little Honda 125, which was definitely too small for me, I am 5'7", 170 centimeters tall, and I did feel a bit cramped on it. But the Honda 125s are the standard motorbikes that here in Australia we use for learners and Ps in the classes, so I didn't really have a lot of other choice. I'm sure if they have really, really tall people, 6 foot and over, they may have a different bike option, but it was absolutely fine for the lesson. But it did show me that that's not the right size for me. So the place where I did the course is a place called Haus, and that is in St Ives, which is probably, it took me about an hour to get there from the coast, and it's obviously in Sydney. I think in peak hour it would take me a lot longer, but an hour. I did take a wrong turn, so it took me a little bit longer, but it's a great course because it has its own internal private sort of road track that you can ride around. So I'll pause that story for a minute to say here we are arriving at the Greenpoint shops, and here we are meeting the other lovely riders from, a couple of the other lovely riders from the group who you probably I've already spoken about, Marie and Fee, Sal and Michelle. And so now we have them. We're taking off. I think I'm second last in the queue, and Michelle is riding, then Marie, then Sal, then me, and behind me is Fee. So we're leaving the Greenpoint shops and now heading on probably a familiar route for everybody, out through Erina and out through Baddo Bay area. So I'll go back to my story. So back to Haus. I had it was a 2-hour lesson. I'd originally bought a 1-hour lesson and then thought, an hour is probably not long enough. I'll ring up and maybe change it to 2 hours. And what was good was they reduced the price by $100, which was really good. So 2 hours. I got there. We had a little chat with the trainer. I explained why I was wanting to do the course and that I had already been riding on Rosie for a while now and that I had driven a manual bike, and he reassured me that I would pick it up quite quickly. So a little bit of instruction and discussion first, and then on to the bike. The friction point, it took me a little bit to get. I stalled it a few times to begin with, and we really just started with no throttle and just easing my hand off the clutch to allow the bike to roll forward a little bit and me using my feet to walk it forward, so I got the feel of it. And then we moved to a little bit of throttle and feet up. So I did stall it a couple of times until I got the feel of what that friction point felt like. But it kind of feels like similar to a car. You can hear when the engine is crying for changing gears, and so I could feel and hear the Honda's engine saying, "Oh my God, change me, I might die." So I eventually got that, which was great. So we stayed in the controlled area for a little while, just going up and back and doing big circles. Got used to doing that in first and second gear, and then a little bit in third gear and dropping back to second and first. And then after we'd done a few sort of laps of the little arena area, we then headed out onto the private road, where I followed the instructor and was able to obviously go first, second, third, a little bit of fourth, then drop it back into third and second and round the corner. What I found was my shifting between first up to second and up to third was very smooth, no issues at all. The shifting back down from third to second was a bit clunky, and I think maybe because I was going too fast when I was trying to shift down. I probably needed to wait till I'd slowed a bit more for the corner and then shifted down to second. But apart from that, it all really made perfect sense, and it was great. So we ended up doing laps of the big course, clockwise, then anti-clockwise, then back into the arena to do some cone weaves and some figure eights, just to practice managing the gears and what have you. So it was a great lesson. At the end I said, should I come back and have another 2-hour session? And he said, honestly, I'd love to take your money, but really you get it, and you were absolutely fine. And so what you really need to do is just go and practice that on some quiet roads rather than coming back and have a lesson, because all we would do is exactly the same thing. So that was really reassuring. I felt like I got it, I understood it. Riding the little Honda was actually quite a surprise. It was light and really nimble, and it was really, it was uncomfortable a little bit because it didn't fit me, but generally the seat was quite comfortable, and I really liked it. What I realised though about riding a manual bike is where the foot pegs and pedals are is kind of really important. I'm going to pause this story for a second, because how beautiful is it riding through this section with the sun coming up. A little bit of lens flare there, but just so beautiful. That time of the morning, just gorgeous. So we're heading up through into Womberl now, and then so we're sort of Erina Heights at the moment. We head into Womberl and then on to Baddow Bay to meet Tanya, and then on to Norah Head Beach House Cafe. So back to the story. Gosh, I talk a lot. I found that the seat was much more comfortable than Rosie on the Honda, so that was surprising. What I found was that because the bike was a bit small for me potentially, the placement of the foot pedals and gears and brake and what have you were really uncomfortable for me. I found it really hard to move my ankle to change gears and to get my foot onto the rear brake, which is on the right hand foot. So it made me realise that potentially if I'm going to buy a geared bike, I need those pedals to be a little bit forward for me. I've got a bit of a dodgy hip and a dodgy knee from breaking it when I was skiing, and so having my legs that little bit and my feet that little bit more forward is likely to be a little bit more comfortable for me, rather than right underneath me and a little bit back, which is where it was on the Honda 125. So all in all, it was a great lesson, and it gave me confidence that yes, I think I can ride a manual bike and just need a bit of practice. But it also showed me what I might need to look for when I'm looking at or considering buying a manual bike. So lots of good information. I've said before, I can't look at buying a manual bike and I can't ride legally on the public roads until August, when I come off my P's and go on to my black license. So until then, my friend Fee has a Honda 125 and my granddaughter Mia has a Honda 125, and so they've both offered to go to the uni car park for me to do a bit of practice riding, so I will definitely take them up on that. And that's the story about my private lesson. There you go. When I was there, they actually had some people doing a beginner adventure riding course, and so as part of their whole setup at Heart, I think they must have a little bit of a beginner adventure course, and I thought, oh my gosh, that would be a lot of fun as well, but one step at a time. All right, so back to the riding. Look at that sky. It is beautiful, just beautiful. So we're now up in Womberl. We've been this way before. We're going to head through the roundabout and head towards Baddow Bay. The other thing that has happened here in Australia, which I think had media coverage worldwide, was the terrorist attack at Bondi Beach. I may have mentioned in a couple of videos ago that Bondi Beach holds a bit of a special place for me. I used to live there many moons ago. When I had my first child, we were living in Bondi Beach, just a couple of 100 metres from that north end of Bondi Beach where the attacks happened. It was incredibly sad and incredibly distressing. What I found a bit concerning, so much of it that I found concerning, is I was reflecting on when these sorts of events have happened in the past in Australia, and I think about Port Arthur in Tasmania, and I'm old enough to remember the Hilton bombings here in Australia, is how the footage from these sorts of events, back when those other events happened, the only footage that you saw around it was the footage that the media showed on the news and what have you. But nowadays, the footage that you see, just going back to that footage that the media show you is always edited footage, and so anything that is potentially extremely traumatic is obviously removed from that footage. But now with social media, that footage is there in its raw form and consumed by people without that filter, without that editing, and so that is just distressing. And so the images or the footage that I had seen, I work in the media industry, and so I had saw the raw footage, but the raw footage was the same as the footage that I was seeing on TikTok and X and on Instagram. And so children can see that, young adults can see that there's no filter, and that's distressing. And so it's been a tough time in Australia for the local community in Sydney and, you know, all of Australia, who are just so incredibly impacted by those events. That's probably all I need to say about that. We are now heading up through, we've gone past Baddo Bay, where we have picked up our extra rider, and we are now on our way down and over my favourite bridge shortly, or one of my favourite bridges. You know I love a bridge, and heading out to Norah Head. It has gotten even hotter as we've been riding, even though it's so early in the morning. It's crazy, but still getting a nice breeze. I find when I flick my visor up, if I'm going slow, it's okay, I get a lovely breeze. But if I'm going a really fast, well, not really fast, Rosie doesn't go really fast, but if I go 70, oh, here's our bridge, hang on, look at that. Over to the right is the beach, and over, or the ocean, and over to the left is the big lake. Beautiful. People out jogging, getting their early morning exercise in. Lovely. And now I've lost my train of thought, so I can't remember what I was just saying. It'll come back to me. So through this section, we've been before, and you know, we've stopped in this little car park on our right to meet people, but we don't need to today. We keep going, and we're heading on to a road called Wilfred Barrett Drive. 70 kilometres and then up to 80. It's very pretty along here, lots of bushland on either side. We've still got the ocean to our right and the bush and the lake to our left, and that big blue sky. There is an old wives' tale about somebody who haunts this road. I think I've mentioned it before in one of my earlier videos, and so people are a bit freaked out about riding and driving along this road at night. I've never seen or heard anything though, so it could be just one of those, you know, superstition things, but it's there anyway. There were also lots of bicycle riders out today as well, this hour of the morning, and I guess because it's so hot, they thought they'd get their ride in early like us, before the crowds and the heat get them. It must be very hot on a bike, because you don't obviously get as much of a breeze as you do on a motorbike. When I was at the Heart Centre for my lesson, I also had a little sit on I think it's a Honda GB 350, and it's a very cute little bike, quite light-ish. The pedals were a little bit more forward than on the 125, and I thought, oh, that's not too bad. But I still obviously have people, as I've mentioned before, suggesting that the 500 might be a better option, and I'll talk a little bit more about the 500 in the next video. So still on Wilfred Barrett Drive here. There's some great walking tracks just to our left that I've done before. There's 3 or 4, Lily Pilly track and a couple of others that are not too strenuous, but you can spend a couple of hours in there walking around the tracks. and it's lovely, and some beautiful big trees, big gum trees with really red trunks, which are just beautiful. I love the bush. For this little trip, I've packed a pair of shorts and a pair of thongs, as in thongs you put on your feet, in the bag, as I've done before when I went to Terrigal, so that when I get to Norah Head I can change into shorts and thongs to eat my breakfast. Otherwise I think I would swelter to death. You would think that I would be okay with the heat, but as I get older I find I am not. Part of my heritage is Papua New Guinean, and so you would think that in my DNA is a tolerance for the heat and the humid heat, which is what it is here in Australia at the moment, or certainly on the east coast and Sydney and the central coast. But as I get older, my ability to cope with that is less and less. I'm not quite sure what that is, because as a child I grew up in Albury, which is on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. We didn't have air conditioning, and it was either stinking hot in summer or absolutely freezing cold in winter. And so I was quite used to it back then, but not quite so much anymore. But that's okay. It's lovely. Look at the lush bushland. Oh, the other thing that we actually had, I can't remember whether I mentioned this in the previous video, but we had some significant bushfires here on the coast. I may have mentioned it in the other video. And today another one sparked off in the same area, and also one sparked off not far from our house because of fallen power lines, but luckily they were both extinguished really quickly, which is fantastic. The emergency services people did an amazing job. They do an amazing job. So a quick right turn here, almost at cafe. Back into suburbia, 50 k's around this little area. This would be a lovely spot to live. Near the cafe you can do a walk, as I said before, up to the lighthouse and see the beautiful views, or stay up there, but you can also follow a little track down to a couple of beaches which are lovely for kids. They weren't too rough the last time I went there, and they're just a little bit hidden out of the way, and so that makes them not as accessible, which is nice. So here we are, we've made it to the cafe, which is up here on our right, and just finding a little parking spot. We tried to squish as many into each of the parking lots as we can, so straight ahead so you can see that cafe, so that it leaves space for others. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, which will be the ride back. Bye for now.